I woke up to silence that morning, the kind of silence that feels unnatural, even in an empty house. At first, I thought it was one of those rare moments when Lila was just being quiet. Maybe she'd gone out for an early morning run or decided to grab coffee before I got up. But as I moved through the house, the unease began to creep in. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her coat wasn't on the hook. I called out her name, expecting to hear her light-hearted reply from another room, but the echo of my voice was the only response. That's when I noticed the closet. Half-empty hangers dangled awkwardly, her favorite clothes missing. The drawer where she kept her jewelry and little trinkets was open, its contents cleared out. Even the framed photo of us from our anniversary, something she had insisted on placing beside the bed, was gone. I stood there, staring at the hollow remnants of her presence, trying to process what this meant. At first, I thought there had to be an explanation. Maybe she had left in a hurry for some reason and just taken a few things with her. Maybe there was some kind of emergency. I pulled out my phone, half expecting to see a missed call or a text message explaining everything. Nothing. Panic turned into confusion, then confusion into a creeping dread. I searched the house, even though I already knew the answer. Her suitcase was gone. The bathroom shelves where she kept her skincare products were empty. And worst of all, there wasn't even a note. For 8 years, we'd shared a life together. Lila had been my partner, my confidant, the woman I had built my future around. Sure, we had our ups and downs. What marriage didn't? But I never thought it was bad enough for her to just vanish like this. No goodbye. No explanation. Just gone. I sat down on the edge of the bed that suddenly felt too big, too empty. My mind raced, grasping at memories, looking for answers. Had I missed something? Were there signs I had ignored? I replayed our last few weeks together, combing through every conversation, every interaction. There were disagreements, sure. She had been distant lately, more irritable than usual. But nothing to suggest this complete abandonment of everything we had built. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself that it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she just needed space. Maybe she was coming back. But as the hours turned into days, and the days into 2 long weeks, the reality became impossible to deny. She wasn't coming back. At first, I felt devastated. The kind of heartbreak that makes you feel like you're suffocating. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house like a ghost, haunted by her absence. Every little thing reminded me of her. The way she always left her coffee mug on the counter, the stack of magazines she kept by the couch, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. But as the days dragged on, the devastation gave way to something else, anger. Not the kind of anger that flares up and fizzles out, but the deep, simmering kind. How could she do this? How could she just walk away without a word, without even giving me the decency of an explanation? I had loved her. I had supported her dreams, stood by her through thick and thin. And this was how she repaid me? Friends tried to comfort me, but their words only made things worse. Maybe she's going through something, they'd say. Or, sometimes people just need to find themselves. But none of that felt like an excuse for the betrayal I was grappling with. This wasn't just about her leaving. It was about the way she had done it, the way she had discarded our life together as if it meant nothing. I spent hours replaying our years together, searching for the moment it all started to unravel. When had she stopped loving me? When had I become someone she could walk away from so easily? The questions circled endlessly, gnawing at me, but the answers remained elusive. By the end of those 2 weeks, I was exhausted, physically, mentally, emotionally. The woman I had devoted my life to was gone, and I had no idea why. All I knew was that the life I thought I had, the future I thought we were building, had been shattered. But even in the depths of that heartbreak, there was a flicker of something else, something I couldn't name yet, a seed of resolve buried deep beneath the pain. I didn't know it then, but I was about to uncover a side of myself I hadn't known existed. 2 weeks of silence had passed, each day dragging slower than the last. I was beginning to accept that Lila wasn't coming back, though the questions she left behind gnawed at me constantly. Then the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but a strange knot tightened in my stomach as I hesitated before answering. Hello? Hey, loser. The voice on the other end was smug, dripping with arrogance. It wasn't Lila. Hope I'm not interrupting your pity party. My grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? The man chuckled, a sound that made my blood boil. Name's Jeff. Thought I'd introduce myself properly since Lila didn't bother to. I'm her new man. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't speak. Jeff didn't seem to notice or care. He kept talking, his voice grating on every nerve I had left. Just wanted to let you know, she's doing great. She doesn't miss you, if that's what you were wondering. What do you want? I asked, my tone sharp, though my heart was pounding. Oh, nothing much, Jeff said, feigning innocence. I just thought you'd like to know how well things are going for us. The house is nice, real nice. Thanks for setting it up so perfectly. We're really making it our own. The house. My house. The realization hit like a thunderbolt, and the anger I'd been holding back surged forward. Jeff's voice droned on, something about redecorating and new furniture, but I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing, piecing together the implications of his words. Lila hadn't just left me. She had moved Jeff into the home we'd built together, the home I had painstakingly maintained. Thanks for everything, Jeff added, his tone laced with mockery. I guess you're good for something after all. I took a slow, deep breath, forcing myself to remain calm. Letting him see my anger would only feed his arrogance. Jeff, I said evenly, cutting through his rambling, do me a favor. Oh yeah? What's that? Check the house deed again. The line went silent. For a split second, I could almost hear him processing what I just said. Before he could respond, I hung up. My heart was pounding, but a smile tugged at the corner of my lips. Jeff had no idea what he had walked into. The house, which he clearly thought was his prize for winning Lila, was legally mine. Every square foot of it. I had handled all the paperwork when we purchased it, and Lila had left those details to me. She didn't know, or didn't care, that her name wasn't even on the deed. She and Jeff had moved into a house they had no claim to, and I wasn't about to let them keep it. The call left me energized in a way I hadn't felt in weeks. The sadness and confusion that had consumed me were replaced by something sharper, more focused. I wasn't just going to sit back and let them steal what was mine. If they thought they could waltz into my life and take over, they were sorely mistaken. I poured myself a drink and sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. I didn't expect Jeff to call back right away. He needed time to uncover the truth, to realize the extent of their mistake. And when he did, I'd be ready. The thought of Jeff and Lila discovering the reality of their situation brought a flicker of satisfaction. They thought they were untouchable, that they'd pulled off the ultimate betrayal without consequence. But they'd underestimated me. I spent the rest of the evening reviewing the deed, the lease agreements, and every piece of paperwork tied to the house. My lawyer had always advised me to keep my assets well documented, and now that preparation was paying off. Everything was in my name, from the property taxes to the utilities. Lila and Jeff had no legal footing to stand on. The next day passed uneventfully, though I found myself glancing at my phone more often than usual. I knew Jeff would call back eventually. It was only a matter of time. Sure enough, by the late afternoon, the phone buzzed. His name wasn't in my contacts, but I recognized the number immediately. I let it ring for a moment before answering. Hello? You son of a... Jeff's voice was a mix of panic and fury. What the hell did you do? You own the house? I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone calm. It's all in the deed, Jeff. Maybe you should have done your homework before moving in. He launched into a string of expletives, ranting about betrayal, fraud, and how I couldn't do this to him. I let him rage, listening with a calm amusement that only seemed to infuriate him further. When he finally paused, out of breath, I added, "Oh, and just so you know, the lease agreement you signed, that's with me too, and you're in violation of it." I hung up again, cutting him off mid-sentence. My heart was racing, adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I couldn't stop the grin spreading across my face. Let the games begin. The hours after Jeff's panicked callback were filled with a kind of satisfaction I hadn't felt in weeks. It wasn't just about having the upper hand. It was about reclaiming control. After weeks of confusion, heartbreak, and unanswered questions, I finally had the opportunity to set things right on my terms. I didn't hear from Jeff or Lila the next day. That silence was almost more satisfying than his frantic shouting had been. I could picture them pacing the house, poring over paperwork, and arguing about how they'd ended up in this mess. The image of Jeff, the smug man who had called me a loser, now floundering under the weight of his own arrogance, was poetic. I wasn't going to rush my next move. The beauty of the situation was that I didn't have to. Every legal document was in my name, and the law was entirely on my side. They could rant, rave, and throw accusations all they wanted, but nothing they did could change the fact that they had no claim to the house they were so eager to flaunt. In the meantime, I started putting my plan into motion. I reached out to my lawyer, Andrew, a sharp and meticulous professional who had helped me manage my real estate assets for years. When I explained the situation, he didn't hide his amusement. "So, let me get this straight," Andrew said, a hint of laughter in his voice. "Your wife left you, moved in with her boyfriend, and they're living in one of your properties?" "Pretty much," I replied, unable to suppress a small chuckle myself. Andrew shook his head. "You can't make this stuff up." "Well, the good news is you're in the clear. The deed is in your name, and the lease agreement gives you full control. If they're in violation, you have every right to terminate it." "That's exactly what I want to do," I said firmly. "No more playing nice." Andrew agreed to draft the termination notice immediately. "They'll have 30 days to vacate," he explained. "Legally, there's no way they can fight it, but I'm guessing they won't take it well." "I'm counting on it," I said with a wry smile. That evening, as I sat in the quiet of my home, I reflected on how far things had spiraled. Lila's betrayal had left me reeling, but now, I felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about drawing a line in the sand. Lila and Jeff had crossed it, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. 2 days later, the termination notice was delivered. I received confirmation from Andrew that it had been served to the tenants, and I waited for the inevitable fallout. It didn't take long. The phone rang just after noon. It was Lila. "Hello?" I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Nathan," she began, her tone frantic. "What is this notice about? Why are you terminating the lease?" "Stop," I interrupted, my voice calm but firm. "You don't get to play the victim here, Lila. You made your choices. You walked out. Now you're living with the consequences." Her voice wavered. But this is our home now. You can't just—" "It's my house," I corrected her. "You don't have a leg to stand on, legally or otherwise." She tried to argue, but her words were a tangled mess of desperation and half-hearted excuses. I didn't have the patience for it. "You and Jeff have 30 days to vacate," I said. "After that, I'll have no problem involving law enforcement if necessary." The line went silent for a moment. Then, in a quieter voice, she asked, "Why are you doing this?" I felt a flicker of something. Was it guilt? Pity? Whatever it was, I pushed it aside. "Because you don't get to walk all over me and expect me to stay silent. You made your bed, Lila. Now lie in it." I hung up before she could respond. That evening, I received another call, this time from Jeff. Predictably, he was livid. His shouting was barely coherent, a string of insults and threats that only served to reinforce how powerless he really was. I listened in silence, letting him vent until he ran out of steam. "You done?" I asked, my tone calm. "This isn't over," he spat. "We'll see about that," I replied and hung up again. The storm was just beginning, but for the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Lila and Jeff had underestimated me, and now they were reaping the rewards of their arrogance. I wasn't just regaining control of my house. I was reclaiming control of my life. The fallout from the termination notice hit faster and harder than I expected. The morning after my call with Jeff, I woke up to a barrage of texts and missed calls from both him and Lila. They ranged from frantic pleas to outright threats, a chaotic cocktail of desperation that made their situation all the more satisfying to watch unfold. I ignored the messages. I had nothing more to say, and besides, the legal process was already in motion. The 30-day countdown had begun, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. By midday, Jeff's frantic texts escalated into another phone call. I answered this time, curious to see what angle he'd try next. "You're making a big mistake," he began, his voice dripping with barely contained anger. "You can't just throw us out. This is our home now." "Our home?" I replied, feigning surprise. "That's interesting, Jeff. Because last I checked, the deed has my name on it, and you're violating the lease agreement. So no, it's not your home." He sputtered, searching for a retort but finding none. "This isn't fair," he finally said. "Lila and I have built a life here. A life in a house you have no right to," I shot back. "Maybe you should have thought about that before moving in." His tone shifted, becoming more aggressive. "If you think I'm just going to roll over and let you win, you've got another thing coming. I'll fight this." "Good luck with that," I replied calmly. "The law's on my side, Jeff. You might want to save your energy for packing." I hung up, feeling a surge of satisfaction. Jeff's bravado was crumbling, and it was only a matter of time before Lila followed suit. Sure enough, a few hours later, she called me. This time, her tone was different, not angry, but pleading. "Nathan, please," she began, her voice trembling. "Can we just talk? This has all gotten out of hand." "There's nothing to talk about, Lila," I said evenly. "You made your choices, and now you're dealing with the consequences. That's how life works." "But where are we supposed to go?" she asked, her voice breaking. "We don't have anywhere else lined up. You can't just leave us stranded." I paused, letting her words hang in the air. Part of me felt a twinge of guilt. This was the woman I'd once loved, after all. But then I remembered the way she'd left, the mocking tone in Jeff's voice when he first called me, and the pain of those first 2 weeks when I'd been left alone to pick up the pieces. "You should have thought of that before," I said finally. "This isn't my problem anymore, Lila. You made sure of that when you walked out." She tried to argue, but I wasn't interested in hearing it. I ended the call, feeling a strange mixture of closure and finality. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in control, not just of the house, but of my life. The days that followed were quiet on my end, though I knew chaos was brewing on theirs. Mutual friends began reaching out, their messages laced with curiosity and a hint of gossip. "Did you really kick Lila and her boyfriend out of the house?" one friend asked. "Yes," I replied simply. "It's my house." The responses varied. Some expressed surprise, others outright support. But the general sentiment was clear. People were starting to see through Lila and Jeff's facade. The life they tried to build on the back of their betrayal was crumbling, and the cracks were showing. As their move-out day loomed closer, I received fewer messages from Lila and Jeff. I assumed they were too busy scrambling to find a new place to bother me, and I was perfectly fine with that. The silence was a welcome change, a reminder that their drama no longer held any power over me. When the day finally arrived, I stopped by the property after work to ensure they had vacated. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed the lights were off, the curtains drawn. The house was silent, empty. I stepped inside and was greeted by a strange sense of calm. They were gone. Walking through the rooms, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The house, once a battleground for betrayal and heartbreak, was mine again. And this time, it felt different, cleaner, lighter, as though it had been purged of the negativity that had plagued it. I stood in the living room, taking in the stillness, and realized that this wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of a new one. Lila and Jeff had tried to take everything from me, but in the end, they'd only freed me. As I locked up and headed home, I couldn't help but smile. The storm was over, and I had weathered it. Now, it was time to rebuild. The day after Lila and Jeff vacated the house, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in months. It wasn't just the absence of their drama. It was the knowledge that I had stood my ground, reclaimed what was mine, and emerged stronger on the other side. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to reflect on everything that had happened. Lila's departure, the betrayal, the smugness of Jeff's initial call, and the chaos that followed. It all played out like scenes from a movie. But now, the credits had rolled, and I was finally free to write the next chapter of my life. That morning, I drove to the house. It was a crisp, clear day, the kind that made everything feel possible. As I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, I was struck by the quiet. The silence wasn't oppressive or sad. It was peaceful. The house felt empty, yes, but it also felt clean, as though it had been stripped of all the negativity that had once filled it. I walked from room to room, taking note of what needed to be repaired or replaced. Jeff and Lila hadn't exactly left things in pristine condition. There were scuff marks on the walls, scratches on the floors, and a lingering smell that I couldn't quite place. But none of it bothered me. If anything, it was an opportunity to make the space my own again. Later that day, I met with a cleaning crew and a contractor. The cleaning crew was efficient, scrubbing away every trace of Lila and Jeff's presence, while the contractor and I discussed plans to repaint the walls, refinish the floors, and make a few upgrades. By the end of the day, the house already felt different, brighter, lighter, and full of potential. As the renovations began, I found myself rediscovering a sense of purpose. I threw myself into the project, choosing colors, picking out furniture, and envisioning how each room would look once it was complete. It wasn't just about fixing the house, it was about rebuilding my life. The process was surprisingly therapeutic. Painting the walls felt like wiping the slate clean. Refinishing the floors felt like grounding myself in something solid and unshakable. Every decision, every small improvement, was a step toward reclaiming not just the house, but the part of myself I had lost during my marriage to Lila. Outside of the renovations, I started reconnecting with old friends and hobbies. Chris, my closest friend, made it his mission to drag me out of the house at least once a week. "You've spent enough time wallowing," he said one night as we sat at a bar, beers in hand. "It's time to start living again." He was right, of course. Slowly but surely, I began to re-enter the world. I picked up photography again, dusting off the camera that had been sitting and used in a closet for years. I started going to the gym, channeling my frustration and energy into something productive. I even joined a local hiking group, exploring trails I'd never had time to visit before. The more I focused on myself, the less I thought about Lila and Jeff. Their betrayal, once a constant source of pain, became a distant memory. I didn't know where they were or what they were doing, and I didn't care. My life was moving forward, and they were no longer part of the story. A few weeks after the house renovations were complete, I invited Chris over for dinner. As we sat in the newly decorated dining room, laughing and reminiscing, I realized how far I had come. The house, once a symbol of heartbreak, was now a place of peace and possibility. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a home, my home. By the time Chris left that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: pride. I had faced betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation, but I had come out stronger. The house was proof of that, a tangible reminder of my resilience and determination. As I stood in the living room, looking out at the moonlit yard, I thought about what lay ahead. There was still work to be done, both on the house and on myself, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it. The future was mine to shape, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. With the house fully restored and my life regaining a sense of normalcy, I thought the chapter with Lila and Jeff was finally closed. But of course, life rarely lets you move on without a few final twists. The day I received a letter from Jeff's lawyer, I couldn't help but laugh. It was a pathetic attempt at intimidation, accusing me of fraudulently evicting them and demanding compensation for the emotional distress I had allegedly caused. The audacity was almost impressive. Jeff, the man who had mocked me for weeks, was now trying to play the victim. I handed the letter to my lawyer, Andrew, who skimmed through it with a smirk. "This is nothing more than a desperate bluff," he said, tossing the letter onto his desk. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on." Andrew's confidence reassured me, but I couldn't help feeling a flicker of annoyance. Jeff and Lila had already taken so much from me: my peace, my trust, and the life I thought I was building. Now, they were trying to take my time and energy. But if they wanted a fight, I was more than ready. Over the next few weeks, Jeff's threats escalated. He called, texted, and even showed up outside the house once, yelling obscenities and demanding justice. Each time, I calmly reminded him that he was trespassing and that I had no intention of engaging with his antics. My resolve only seemed to enrage him further, which, admittedly, was satisfying. Meanwhile, Lila's approach was softer. She started sending me long, apologetic messages, claiming she had been manipulated by Jeff and that she deeply regretted her actions. "I never wanted it to end this way," one text read. "I was confused, Nathan. I made a mistake. Please, can we just talk?" Her words might have swayed me months ago, but now they felt hollow. The time for apologies had long passed. I didn't respond to her messages, and eventually, they stopped coming. Jeff, however, wasn't ready to give up. His lawyer sent another letter, this time threatening to sue for damages. Andrew, ever unflappable, crafted a response that was equal parts professional and scathing. He outlined the lease violations, the legal grounds for termination, and the overwhelming evidence in my favor. "If they want to take this to court," Andrew said, "they're going to lose. Badly." The letter seemed to do the trick. Jeff's lawyer went radio silent, and the threats stopped. Once again, I was reminded of how flimsy their entire plan had been. Jeff and Lila had built their relationship on lies, arrogance, and betrayal, and now they were reaping the rewards of their actions. With the legal drama behind me, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The house, now fully renovated, was a haven of peace and stability. My career was thriving, my friendships were stronger than ever, and I was rediscovering passions I had long neglected. Photography, hiking, and even cooking became outlets for creativity and joy, filling my days with purpose. One evening, as I sorted through old files, I stumbled upon the original deed to the house. Seeing my name on that document brought a wave of pride and satisfaction. This house had been a point of contention, a battleground for betrayal, but it was also a symbol of resilience. I had fought for it, not because I needed the property, but because it represented everything I had worked for and refused to let anyone take from me. Chris stopped by later that week, bringing a bottle of wine to celebrate what he called the official end of the Jeff and Lila saga. We sat on the porch, sipping wine and laughing about how far things had come. "You know," Chris said, leaning back in his chair, "a year ago, I was worried about you. But now, you're unshakable, man." I shrugged, smiling. I had to be. They gave me no choice. He raised his glass. "To resilience and revenge." I clinked my glass against his. To moving forward. The legal threats, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It was all behind me now. Jeff and Lila had tried to take everything, but they had only succeeded in teaching me how strong I really was. Their drama no longer held any power over me. My life was my own again, and I was determined to make the most of it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a golden glow, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This wasn't just the end of a chapter, it was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in a long time, I was genuinely excited about what lay ahead. Lila and Jeff's eviction was now a memory, and I was finally starting to enjoy the peace that came with reclaiming my life. Yet, life has a way of letting loose one last storm before the calm truly sets in. About a month after the legal drama ended, word began trickling back to me through mutual acquaintances. Jeff and Lila's relationship was imploding under the weight of stress and mutual blame. It seemed that their so-called perfect partnership hadn't been built to withstand reality. According to Chris, who always seemed to know the latest gossip, Lila had discovered that Jeff wasn't quite the man she thought he was. His flashy lifestyle had been funded by borrowed money and empty promises, and without the stability of my house and my unwitting financial support, the cracks in their relationship had become chasms. "They're not even trying to keep it private," Chris said one afternoon, grinning as he leaned against my kitchen counter. Apparently, she kicked him out of wherever they're staying last week. Some huge blow-up. People are saying Jeff's back to couch surfing. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. The man who had so confidently declared, "I own your wife now," had been reduced to begging for places to crash. As for Lila, she was reportedly trying to piece her life back together, though her attempts to reconnect with old friends and acquaintances were met with mixed reactions. Betrayal, it seemed, had a way of catching up with people. Even so, I didn't feel the schadenfreude I thought I would. Knowing their lives were unraveling brought no real satisfaction, only a quiet sense of closure. They were living with the consequences of their choices, just as I had lived with the fallout of their betrayal. The difference was, I had used that fallout to rebuild, while they had let it destroy them. One afternoon, while I was working in the garden, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. It was from Lila. I hesitated before opening it, wondering what she could possibly have left to say. "Nathan, I know I have no right to ask, but I wanted to apologize. I see now how much I hurt you, and I hate myself for it. Jeff is gone, and I realize he was never who I thought he was. I was stupid and selfish, and I threw away the best thing I ever had. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know that I'm sorry." I read the message twice, then set my phone aside without responding. Her apology, while unexpected, didn't stir much within me. There was no anger, no desire to argue or point out the hypocrisy of her words, just indifference. Lila's regret was hers to carry, not mine to absolve. In the following days, I learned through Chris that Jeff had tried reaching out to Lila, hoping to reconcile. She had reportedly refused, finally seeing him for who he truly was. It was ironic, really. She had left me for him, only to realize too late that her dreams of a better life were built on lies. While their drama unfolded in the background, my own life was flourishing. The house renovations were complete, and the space felt like a true reflection of me, calm, grounded, and filled with potential. I had taken up photography more seriously, turning it from a hobby into a side passion that brought me unexpected joy. Weekends were now spent exploring local trails, capturing sunsets, and rediscovering the beauty in the world. The friends who had stood by me during the worst of it continued to remind me that I wasn't alone. Chris was still a constant presence, dragging me to social events and pushing me to step outside my comfort zone. "You're too good a guy to sit around by yourself," he said one night, shoving a beer into my hand at a backyard barbecue. "The world deserves to see this new and improved Nathan." And while I wasn't quite ready to dive into dating again, I had started to entertain the idea. There was a woman in my hiking group who always seemed to end up walking beside me, her laughter brightening even the most grueling trails. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something. A spark. A reminder that new beginnings were possible. As for Lila and Jeff, their lives had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the cost of betrayal and the fragility of relationships built on deceit. I didn't wish them ill, but I also didn't waste energy hoping for their redemption. Their journey was theirs to navigate, just as mine was mine. One evening, as I stood on the porch of my newly renovated house, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The chaos, the heartbreak, the anger, it was all behind me now. What lay ahead was a future filled with possibility, one I was ready to embrace with open arms. With the drama of Jeff and Lila firmly in the rearview mirror, I found myself settling into a life that felt entirely my own. The house, once a battleground for betrayal and heartbreak, had become a sanctuary. Each day brought new opportunities for growth, and I embraced them with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. The renovations were finished, the last of the paint dried, and the furniture arranged just the way I liked. Every inch of the house reflected my personality and preferences. No compromises, no lingering traces of a life that had been tainted by deceit. It was a fresh start, and I relished every moment of it. With the house no longer a project, I shifted my focus to rebuilding myself. Therapy continued to be a cornerstone of my recovery. Dr. Miller, ever insightful, helped me confront the deeper wounds left by the betrayal. "Healing isn't about forgetting," she said during one session. "It's about finding peace in the memories, even the painful ones." I took her words to heart, revisiting old memories not with bitterness but with curiosity. What had I missed? What patterns had I ignored? The process wasn't easy. There were moments when the weight of those reflections threatened to pull me under. But it was necessary. Each session left me feeling lighter, as though I was shedding the emotional baggage I had carried for years. Meanwhile, my social circle continued to grow. Chris remained a constant source of encouragement, pushing me to step out of my comfort zone. "You've spent enough time in your cocoon," he said one night over dinner. "It's time to spread your wings." And so, I did. I joined a local photography club, where I met people who shared my passion for capturing life's fleeting moments. Our outings became the highlight of my weekends. Wandering through forests, exploring hidden beaches, and chasing sunsets with my camera in hand. Each photo felt like a small triumph, a reminder that beauty existed even in the wake of heartbreak. I also found myself spending more time with my hiking group. The woman who always seemed to walk beside me, her name was Sarah, had an easy way of making me laugh, even when the trail was steep and my legs ached. She wasn't just kind. She was genuine, a quality I hadn't realized I craved until I met her. We started meeting for coffee after hikes, our conversations flowing effortlessly. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something real, something worth exploring. Through all of this, Lila and Jeff faded further into the background. I heard occasional updates through mutual friends. Lila was working a retail job to make ends meet, while Jeff had moved on to another unsuspecting target. Their story no longer evoked anger or sadness. Instead, it was a distant echo, a reminder of the life I had left behind. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my house, looking out at the garden I had nurtured back to life, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The pain of betrayal had once threatened to define me, but now it was merely a chapter in a much larger story. The lessons I had learned about resilience, self-worth, and the importance of setting boundaries had reshaped me into someone stronger, someone wiser. The house, once a symbol of broken dreams, now stood as a testament to my journey. It wasn't just a building. It was a reflection of my growth, my determination, and my ability to rebuild in the face of adversity. As the stars began to dot the night sky, I raised a glass to the future. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with open arms and an open heart. Months had passed since the chaos of Jeff and Lila had finally been put to rest. My life had become something entirely new, a mix of calm, fulfillment, and quiet excitement for the future. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they no longer stung. Instead, they served as reminders of how far I had come. Then, one evening, at a mutual friend's birthday party, I saw her, Lila. It was the first time we'd been in the same room since her move-out day. She looked different. The confident, glamorous woman I had once known was now subdued, her demeanor quieter, almost hesitant. She caught my eye across the room, and for a brief moment, I considered walking away. But curiosity, or perhaps closure, kept me rooted in place. She approached me slowly, as though unsure of how to start. "Nathan," she said, her voice soft, almost timid. "Lila," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I wasn't sure if you'd come," she admitted, glancing around the room. "It's been a while." "It has," I said simply, letting the silence fill the space between us. I wasn't going to make this easy for her, nor did I feel the need to. She shifted uncomfortably. "You look good. Happy." "I am," I replied honestly. "Life's been good to me." She nodded, her eyes flickering with something I couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps, or longing. "I've heard about some of the things you've been doing. The photography, the house renovations. It sounds like you've really turned things around." I shrugged. "I've been busy." The conversation felt stilted, and I had no desire to prolong it. But before I could excuse myself, she spoke again, her voice tinged with hesitation. "Nathan, I just want you to know, I'm sorry for everything." I paused, letting her words sink in. Months ago, I might have craved this apology, might have thought it would bring some sense of closure. But now, standing in front of her, I realized I didn't need it. I had already made peace with the past, and her words, while sincere, couldn't change what had happened. "I appreciate that," I said finally, my tone even. "But we've both moved on. What's done is done." She nodded, her expression falling slightly. "I know I don't deserve it, but I hope, someday, you can forgive me." Forgiveness. It was a strange word, one I hadn't given much thought to in recent months. Did I forgive her? Perhaps. But more importantly, I had forgiven myself for the times I had ignored the red flags, for the trust one had misplaced, for staying in a relationship that had long since lost its foundation. "I already have," I said, surprising even myself. "Not for your sake, but for mine. Her eyes glistened, and she opened her mouth to say something more, but I held up a hand. Take care of yourself, Lila. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there in the crowded room. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air washed over me, bringing with it a sense of clarity. That brief encounter with Lila had been the final piece of the puzzle, the last lingering thread of a chapter that was now fully closed. I didn't feel anger or sadness, just relief. Over the next few days, I reflected on how far I'd come. The house, now a haven of peace and creativity, was a symbol of my resilience. My friendships had deepened, my passions had flourished, and my connection with Sarah from the hiking group had grown into something quietly beautiful. Life wasn't just good, it was thriving. I had learned that closure doesn't come from apologies or validation from those who hurt you. It comes from within, from choosing to move forward and build something better. And that's exactly what I had done. As for Lila and Jeff, their stories no longer mattered to me. Whether they found redemption or continued down their paths of self-destruction was irrelevant. My focus was on my life, my growth, and the possibilities that lay ahead. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my house, camera in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This was my life now, simple, fulfilling, and entirely my own, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Looking back, I never imagined that betrayal would become the catalyst for the life I now lived. The scars Lila and Jeff left behind were once raw and painful, but time had turned them into marks of resilience. They reminded me of what I had endured, but more importantly, they showed me how far I had come. The house was no longer just a building. It was a sanctuary. Every room was a reflection of my choices, my growth, and my independence. The once shared spaces that had felt hollow after Lila left were now filled with laughter, friends, and new memories. The walls were lined with photographs I had taken, snapshots of trails I'd hiked, sunrises I'd chased, and moments of joy I'd rediscovered. Sarah had become a significant part of my life. What had started as casual hikes and coffee meetups had blossomed into something steady and meaningful. She was different, grounded, genuine, and kind in a way that felt refreshing after years of navigating the stormy waters of my past relationship. With her, there was no pretense, no agenda, just a shared appreciation for life and the moments that made it worth living. One evening, as Sarah and I sat in the garden, she turned to me with a smile. "You know, you've built something really special here," she said, gesturing to the house, the garden, and the life I had pieced back together. It wasn't easy, I admitted, my gaze drifting to the horizon, but it was worth it. And it was. Every painful moment, every sleepless night, every hard-fought step forward had led me to this point. I had learned to value myself, to set boundaries, and to embrace the things that truly mattered. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers of Lila and Jeff's lives. Lila was reportedly working a string of jobs to make ends meet, her once glamorous life a distant memory. Jeff, predictably, had moved on to another woman, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and burned bridges. Their stories no longer carried any weight in my life. They were simply echoes of a chapter one had closed. The final closure came one afternoon when I received a letter in the mail. It was from Lila. Her handwriting was shaky, and the envelope carried no return address. I hesitated before opening it, unsure if I even wanted to read what she had to say. "Nathan, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to write it. I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that happened, and I want you to know how deeply sorry I am. You didn't deserve what I did to you. I was selfish, and I let my own insecurities and desires destroy something good. I've lost a lot since then, and while I know I can't undo the damage, I hope you find happiness. You deserve it." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, unsure of what to do with it. Her apology, while appreciated, didn't change anything. I had already moved on, but it felt like a fitting epilogue to the story. Lila's acknowledgement of her actions was her burden to carry, not mine. As the months rolled on, I continued to build a life that felt authentic and fulfilling. My photography turned into a small business, with clients reaching out for portraits and nature shoots. The house became a gathering place for friends and family, its walls echoing with laughter and warmth. One evening, as I stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, I felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayal that had once consumed me was now a distant memory, overshadowed by the life I had created. Lila and Jeff had tried to tear me down, but in the end, they had only pushed me toward a better version of myself. This was my life now, one built on resilience, self-respect, and the unwavering belief that even in the face of betrayal, it's possible to rebuild. The future was wide open, and for the first time in years, I was excited to see what it held. As the stars began to dot the sky, I raised a glass to the past, not in anger or regret, but in gratitude. It had shaped me, taught me, and ultimately set me free. And with that, I stepped inside, ready to embrace whatever came next.